Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. It is Thursday, I believe.
That's last time I checked, it
is.
Yes.
Keeping track of the calendar appropriately. How are you doing, Niall?
I'm fine, Robbie. My week is going reasonably well overall, I would say. And yourself?
I just got my Nintendo Switch 2
Exciting
arrived
news.
in the mail, and I spent most of last night, setting it up, downloading the data from the old Switch to the new one, so I didn't get to play very much. Got to play a little bit of Donkey Kong. Very enjoyable. But I've got a train ride to New York and back today that I'm going to be playing the Switch the entire time.
Big day.
Big day.
Excellent. Well, let's get back, I guess, to news of a more serious variety. What is on your radar today?
Just a little bit more serious. Kamala Harris not interested in running for governor of California in 2026. Maybe she just wants to play the Switch 2 all day. The former vice president announced this news yesterday. I'm not actually surprised by it at all. In fact, I think the ex-Veep has her eyes set on a loftier prize, President of the United States. Yes, that's right. I fully expect that Kamala will make another run for the White House in 2028. But right now, she's playing coy. Multiple media outlets reported on Wednesday that after returning from a trip abroad, Harris decided to stay out of the race to succeed Governor Gavin Newsom, himself a likely 2028 contender. For now, my leadership in public service will not be in elected office. I look forward to getting back out and listening to the American people, helping elect Democrats across the nation who will fight fearlessly, and sharing more details in the months ahead about my own plans. The key phrase there is obviously for now. Now, honestly, Kamala is making the right call for her. Why on earth would the former vice president want to be a lowly governor? It's never made any sense to me. For one thing, being governor of a state requires a lot more work than being vice president, a job that actually has very few requirements per the Constitution. Running California, by contrast, means running a state that contains the world's fourth largest economy, dealing directly with tech regulation, the impact of immigration, mass transit issues, housing shortages, crime, forest fires, other issues. Is Kamala cut out for that? Far from convinced. But make no mistake, she does want to be the president. And Kamala's perspective is that last time around in 2024, she was never really allowed to run her race. Since Joe Biden dropped out at the literal last minute, she didn't have time to hire and recruit campaign staff who actually believed in her. She didn't have time to plan and execute a strategy. She didn't have time to convince the American people that she was sufficiently different from Biden, though to be fair, when given the opportunity to distance herself from the unpopular incumbent, she punted. Remember this moment on The View?
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
That was the end of that campaign. I mean, points for loyalty, I guess, but the answer crucified her with swing voters. People did not like the Biden administration and they wanted a change. At no point did Kamala Harris indicate she was going to give it to them. But maybe next time will be the charm. Second time? Third time, actually. If Kamala runs in 2028, it will actually be the third attempt she's made at the presidency. Now, her 2019 campaign, and it's a 2019 campaign because she didn't even make it to 2020, never got off the ground. She dropped out when faced with bad polling in the California primary that had her likely to come in behind even Andrew Yang. Kamala Harris is not someone who has experienced a tremendous amount of success on her own as a national political candidate, yet Biden chose her as his designated successor. And so she would enter the 2028 race with a certain amount of establishment and elite support, also name recognition, even though I don't think there's really some grassroots movement clamoring for her. We've also learned that she's not terrific at long-form interviews, which, if 2024 is any indication, could be a dominant means of introducing candidates to the American people by the time the next election rolls around. Now, I have a feeling that the ascendancy of 3-hour podcasts is not going to be contested anytime soon. A successful presidential candidate is going to need to be able to sit down with Joe Rogan and Andrew Schultz and whoever else for hours and make a favorable impression. Look, love him or hate him, Gavin Newsom has proven he can do that. Pete Buttigieg has proven he can do it. Has Kamala Harris demonstrated that skill? I'm not so sure. Nevertheless, another failed Democratic presidential candidate is wishing Kamala well. Reacting to the news, Hillary Clinton wrote on X, "From prosecutor to senator to vice president, Kamala Harris has always been for the people. I know her next chapter will be no different, whatever shape it takes." Girls get it done, Niall. Look at them. Look at them getting it done.
Glad you paid tribute to Hillary Clinton, paying tribute to Kamala Harris
Yes,
there.
that's what our show, it's commentary on reaction to commentary to reaction things.
I could feel the sincerity in your voice as you read out the Hillary
Overflowing.
Clinton. Look.
I'm untethered from what has been.
Well, indeed, and what might be.
And what might be.
For that matter.
Yes.
So what isn't going to be is Kamala Harris as governor of California. I think she made the right decision.
Of course. Why would she do that?
Right.
Why? I didn't want it for her. I was exhausted at the prospect of this happening to her.
Right. And to my mind, the other point is the risk-reward calculation doesn't work at all, right? If she runs for governor of California and wins, people say, well, of course she should have won. She was the sitting vice president of the Democratic nominee. If she runs for governor of California and loses, that's like literally end of political career. At
Although
that
Richard
point.
Nixon came back from the exact same situation.
Richard Nixon did, and Richard Nixon is the only person in modern history, at least, or well, relatively modern history, who has come back from losing a presidential election in 1960 to winning again, or winning for the first time in 68. Whether Kamala Harris can replicate that pattern, I am highly skeptical of. Look, you know, on this show I have been critical of President Trump numerous times, but I've never been that persuaded that Kamala Harris is some blinding political talent. As you mentioned, as you termed her 2019 campaign, petered out, having begun with great excitement, big crowd in Oakland, there was a lot of media excitement around her. It never really went anywhere. Yes, her people can make the argument that she was burdened by Biden's unpopularity last year, and I think it was a 107-day campaign. That is, you know, that's short to present yourself as the next president.
I can see why if you're self-deluded, you can think that, well, I could have won if I had time to do it my way. She had to use all of the Biden staff for the campaign, and those people were really awful, as we're learning, and they were so beholden to Biden, they didn't want to criticize him. They wouldn't let her, they were keeping her on a leash that was not favorable to her. But she will still be tarred by association with Biden next time around, is the problem. They're going to be, and this will be a problem for Pete Buttigieg as well, even though he does a good job of talking on podcasts and doing unfriendly media, and it does a lot of things right, I think, in terms of his comms and his impressive in some ways as a political figure, but he was a cabinet secretary, and the questions are going to be, well, why didn't you say anything about Biden? Were you not, you couldn't meet with him? I mean, part of the inability of the cabinet to meet with Biden is a theme of the Jake Tapper book. Not that we'll all necessarily be so obsessed with Biden's age in 2028, but I think him and Kamala will be, they'll be hurt by the association in the same way that Hillary Clinton was hurt by the Iraq War vote when she was up against someone, Barack Obama, who hadn't had to take that vote. Kamala and Pete will be up against, you know, Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer and other governors, people who don't have to own anything Biden did.
Yeah, I guess I would differ somewhat in what you think is going to be the salience of that issue in 2028. I mean, I'm just not persuaded that that topic will be quite as dominant as it is now. The Iraq War was still, you know, still going on and still very much part of the picture. The other thing, just finally, is I'm not entirely convinced she will run. I think she's extremely ambitious, and I think she'll think about it.
I think she can't help herself.
Well, I don't know.
They never can. They never can.
If it looks like she's going to lose, I don't know if she'll really get in, but we shall see.
We shall see. My prediction is she does, but why am I making predictions? I don't. It always comes out wrong.
It's always entertaining. It's always entertaining. That's why.
All right, Democrats are reaching deep into their bag of tricks to force the Trump administration to release the Epstein Files. We'll talk about it after this. Democrats in Congress are getting creative. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is using a little-known law to force the Republicans' hand and release the Epstein Files.
The law is called the Rule of Five, and it dates back nearly a century. It stipulates that if any 5 members of a Senate committee, in this case the Homeland Security Committee, request information from a government agency, that agency is required to provide the relevant information.
Well, on Wednesday, Schumer and all 7 Democrats on the committee sent a letter to the DOJ requesting it turn over its files on Epstein. Here's what Schumer had to say announcing the move yesterday.
Our request covers all documents, files, evidence, and other materials in possession of the DOJ, the FBI, related to the case of the United States versus Jeffrey Epstein. It's not a stunt. It's not symbolic. It's a formal exercise of congressional power under federal law. And we expect an answer from DOJ by August the 15th. That's what accountability looks like. This is what oversight looks like. And this is what keeping your promises to the American people look like.
So far, no response from the DOJ or the White House. Schumer says if the department ignores the request, they will take the case to the courts. Yeah, good for them. It seems just obvious to me that regardless of what the issue is, even if it was something other than an Epstein Files, that members of Congress on a relevant committee, of course, should be able to decide we would like files from the executive branch on whatever subject and get those files. I mean, why should the executive agencies should be accountable to more than just the president? They should be accountable to the Congress that designated the setting up of the agencies, and it's all within the prescripts of the legislative process and the Constitution. Right. So I would be baffled and irritated and angry if it was otherwise. If members of Congress, again, on any issue, it doesn't matter if it's Epstein, doesn't matter if Republicans or Democrats, were saying we want information from this government agency on this, and the government agency said we don't have to do that, that would be crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it is a good thing that they are doing this on the Epstein matter in particular, and I think the rule or the standard is a good one. The fact that you require 5 members of the committee to do it basically alleviates the danger of just somebody making endless sort of vexatious requests and paperwork.
Yeah, sure.
But at the same time, it doesn't allow a majority party to completely thwart the will of the minority party, whichever is in either of those rules. I suppose the danger here, or the perceived danger, is if the Trump administration doesn't wish to give up the files and Democrats are trying to push them to give up the files, will Senate Republicans try to intervene in some way to stop that from happening? And if they do, then obviously it would completely destroy the precedent or the rule that this is permissible. The reporting that I was reading, which I think was the Associated Press, were contending that this rule has never been tested in court. So you could perhaps, if you wish to, resist it on that basis and say, no, we're not giving it up. But I mean, it seems politically dangerous not to give it up at this point.
Government agencies don't like to release files, regardless of what the files are, or for any reason. They don't like to set precedents that they have to give you things. They're just secrecy inclined as a matter of habit. I complain about this all the time. That comes up again and again with UAP stuff, which we've covered to some degree, and News Nation has covered quite a bit. Why are they not telling us more? Well, they just don't like to tell you things. They don't believe they have to. They're the G-men. That's by tradition. Doesn't mean they necessarily have secrets. They do have some secrets. They have secrets we don't know about. That's why they're secrets. They have secrets we know that we do know about. They're kind of secrets, but we just want to read it.
It's like the Donald Rumsfeld of secrecy quotes here. But anyway,
I'm having some really inspired commentary this morning.
No one unknowns.
Unknown knowns, right?
Yes.
So Democrats want to put Republicans in a position where MAGA-influenced GOP people who've all tweeted, release the Epstein Files, have to vote against releasing the Epstein Files in order to make Trump happy and just marinate in that hypocrisy, which is what's going to happen.
Sure. Well, so you don't think that Republicans would vote for the release? In other words, you think
like
they
would? It's just Massey and maybe a couple other people.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that the Republicans are facing real challenges from their own base here because of some of those comments that you're kind of alluding to for years and years. I mean, Donald Trump Jr. and J.D. Vance, when he was a senator, and others were always arguing that the withholding of information pertaining to Epstein was disguising some obvious nefariousness. They may be right, they may be wrong. I don't know. I would love to see the unredacted files to find out. But the point is that of the level of disconnect between those promises and what the Trump administration has actually done. And the Democrats are trying to take advantage of that. But if the byproduct of trying to take political advantage is that we all find out more, then I think that's a good thing.
And they could also just release, we want new information, right? The idea that lots of materials related to the Epstein situation have already been released over the years, over and over and over again. there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of files. It's actually like impossible to even read them all or process them all. A lot of it is duplicative. A lot of it is not particularly interesting. It's just government forms. Government work generates tons of paperwork. That's why it can be difficult and vexing to make government officials go through, do records requests, try to find everything where you get the same document over and over again. Any of us journalists who've ever done the FOIA process or the public records process, they'll come to you and go like, yeah, that'll be $10,000 to, cost of printing every one of those documents. And be like, okay, sure. Right. And then you find out it is 10,000 pages of documents, 9,875 of which are just useless.
Sure.
Same information over and over again. Mm-hmm. So, because the government is so vast and there's different agencies not always coordinating. So there's a slight validity to the logistical problem of trying to reveal things. But again, we've come back to this so many times. Pam Bondi made it sound like there was new information, new perpetrators to unmask. That's what the people want. And if you just don't have that, you need to explain why you led people to think that
you did
in the Bondi position when you'd already looked at it.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, that's the whole
because you got carried away on Fox News when they asked you about it.
Right, and you want to
admit that.
Gin up or inflame the base, and none of it was there. The only real issue, and it's a genuine issue with Epstein, of course, is any information that would identify victims who have not been, who would wish to remain private. I mean, that's a completely understandable imperative on their part. But beyond that, what is the actual rationale for not disclosing the stuff? That's what is puzzling to me. I think that Trump's commentary on the case has in fact stoked suspicion in some parts, because why is he so defensive about it? Like, for example, the
Comey hoax?
Well, yeah, all of that stuff, and the idea that his kind of own conspiracy theory makes no sense, which is that the Democrats or the deep state somehow like inserted his name into the files when they were in power, but then never released them, and now
but they knew that he was going to win, and his base was going to make him try to release them,
so
and
absurd.
Then he would see, but my name's in here because of what the Democrats did, and now I'm in this bind. It was a sophisticated special ops, deep cover kind of
something like that. It's just an absurd Trumpian attempt to get out of the box into which he's placed himself. He's been hoisted by his own petard.
You do like that phrase?
Absolutely. In any event, President Trump is also going after one of the oldest and most respected senators, all over a tradition Trump calls ancient and unconstitutional. We'll talk about that after the break.
Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle agitated by President Trump's comments against Republican Senator Chuck Grassley. Now, in a long Truth Social post, the president called out the Judiciary Committee chairman for blue slip objections, which are long-standing Senate tradition. Now, Senator Grassley himself is saying that he's offended and disappointed about Trump's remarks. Trump also reposted truth posts calling for term limits and even calling the 91-year-old senator a rhino or a Republican in name only.
So as Robbie mentioned, this is all over the blue slip objections. It allows senators to submit a review and opinion on judicial nominees in their home state. In that same Truth Social post, Trump saying because of this ancient rule, he will never be able to appoint federal judges in primarily blue states like California, New Jersey, New York, among others. Republican Senator John Kennedy spoke to reporters, and he had this to say on the blue slip's, quote, long and cherished tradition.
Both Democratic presidents and Republican presidents have asked us to get rid of it. We never have, and I hope we never will.
Do you have strong feelings on the blue slips, Robbie?
I am known for my long-running, deep interest in this, which I'm on the record. I'm a scholar of the blue slip process, which I learned about this morning as I was reading the topics for the day.
Excellent.
I was kind of hoping you were going to be the expert on this one.
I always have a bit of arcane Senate rules. I mean, basically,
of the two of us, you're the one more likely to know about arcane Senate.
I think that is a flattering
procedure.
interpretation, or maybe not a flattering interpretation if you think I'm at home reading through Senate procedure every night. The idea, as I understand it, is a senator can object to a certain level of nominee. It's basically district court judges or U.S. attorneys in their home state, and thereby stall the process. Now, you can argue one way or another whether that is undemocratic in a sense, or whether it actually permits senators who have some knowledge of the kind of lay of the land in their home state to raise valid objections. Trump is obviously making a massive deal of this. He's just decided to have a pop at Chuck Grassley. I don't really think Trump's overly concerned about the abstractions of it all. He wants his people on the bench and his people installed as U.S. attorneys. That seems to be that it should go through the normal process. I'm not 100% persuaded a single senator should be able to stall it. That seems just to be vesting an individual senator with quite a lot of power. But naturally, I'm skeptical of Trump's claims, because I just think he feels that almost nothing from any other branch of government should be allowed to stand in his way.
Chuck Grassley is not a rhino, unless we're defining rhino as disagreeing with Trump on any issue at any time. It used to be rhino was like
Mitt Romney.
Yeah, right. If you say you're a Republican, but you're not really a conservative, or you don't care about conservative policy. Now it's just, you could be the most conservative person ever, but if you don't want to give Trump everything he wants every single moment, every single time, and you're not like enthusiastically screaming about how great and wonderful Trump is, then you're a rhino. Now, Chuck Grassley is very old. He is 91. I'm not so against the idea of term limits. You know, we've talked about he's really old. He shows his age in, how he moves around and his mannerisms. I don't know that he's shown it so much in mental lapses or things of that nature. Not
his
that
tweets are quite entertaining.
I don't know if he's the one tweeting.
90-something-year-old.
Well, and the most entertaining of all is supposed to be John Kennedy. That was not a Kennedyan enough response. He's supposed to say, well, that's stupider than a pig in slop. What are you talking? That kind of thing. That's what I want.
Playing his Southern senator, despite the fact that he's Oxford educated, among other things, which he keeps much quieter than his homespun.
It's
Southern
all an act, and I love the act, and I'm entertained by it 100% of the time.
You like a bit of performance from senators.
Performative folksiness is up my alley, yes.
Well, it's certainly John Kennedy should be your guy then, replacing Rand Paul in your senatorial affections.
Well, strong feelings on blue slip objections.
Yes.
You're not getting them here.
Not too many.
We are moderates on this slight issue.
Absolutely. Next on Rising, we're finally seeing signs that the world's view on Gaza might be shifting. But what did it cost to get here? I'll get into that more in my notes next. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to Rising. Niall, what is in your notes today?
Well, today, Robbie, back to a topic we were discussing yesterday, where there are finally signs that the political world is shifting on Gaza. But it's taken so much suffering to get here. The death toll among Palestinians this week passed 60,000 people. Huge swathes of Gaza have been levelled. Children are dying from hunger. At least 16 kids under the age of 5 in just the past few weeks, according to the United Nations. Earlier this week, I spoke with Maram Humaid, a journalist living, working and raising her 2 young children in Gaza. Here's what she had to say.
Even the starvation, it enters now the 5th month without any solution, and people now are dying, are literally dying. And I myself, I'm sharing my message as someone who's afraid of reaching this point, just to face death because of the starvation. I'm in line of those who are waiting, and I'm totally just concerns and just depressed because I reached this point that I'm afraid for my kids and for my life to face death because of starvation. So no one is listening.
The deafness of governments to the plight of the Palestinians is beginning to change, even if it should never have existed in the first place. France recently became the first major European power to say it will recognise the state of Palestine. Britain followed suit with some caveats, and so too, just yesterday, did Canada. Here in the US, the solid support Israel has traditionally enjoyed on the right has begun to fray. In the past few days, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene became the first notable Republican to call what Israel is doing in Gaza a genocide. And even President Trump has distanced himself a little bit from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Good for him. More of that, please. Among Democratic senators, support for blocking US arms sales to Israel reached a new high just last night. A measure from Bernie Sanders drew 27 votes. That's not remotely enough to pass, but it's almost twice as many as had backed a similar resolution before. Meanwhile, social media clips from Gazans themselves have shown the pain and destruction they're experiencing to the world. And back here, primarily online commentators, some from the right and centre, Tucker Carlson to Piers Morgan, Theo Vaughn to Joe Rogan, have expressed abhorrence at what we're seeing. Here's Vaughn in a clip that went viral a couple of months back.
For me, it's just like how I feel like you see all these photos of people, just children, women, people, body parts, just people like putting their kids back together. And I just can't believe that we're watching that and that more isn't said about it.
But in the mainstream media, meanwhile, there's often, in my view, too much credulity about Israeli claims, too much willingness to take talking points at face value, even when they contradict the evidence of our own eyes. Some claim that the United Nations is to blame for not distributing aid, or that Hamas is stealing that aid. The New York Times, to its credit, finally reported just a few days ago that even the Israeli military had, quote, never found proof that Hamas has, quote, systematically stolen food from the United Nations. And I can't improve on a recent headline from the liberal Israeli news organisation Haaretz. Israel caused the hunger crisis in Gaza, no matter how much it tries to blame the UN. Too often, though, we've seen a tendency in mainstream American coverage that has always frustrated me. It's the pattern of casting other nations simply as friends or foes of the US and then tweaking the media lens accordingly. At its worst, that can lead to an absurd credulousness regarding Washington's supposed friends. If you don't believe me, indulge me with a thought experiment. Let's imagine that Vladimir Putin takes a parcel of the land his forces occupy in eastern Ukraine and seals it off completely. Let's imagine this parcel of land has had its own agriculture bombed to oblivion, and no food or other aid enters for more than 2 months. Let's imagine then, as global outrage builds about this growing hunger, that Mr. Putin permits a trickle of aid to be distributed only at sites controlled by the Russian military, and when starving Ukrainians arrive there, they are shot dead in the hundreds. Let's imagine, as a backdrop to this, that Mr. Putin's finance minister, his national security minister, his previous defense minister, and his current defense minister had all publicly and explicitly advocated for siege tactics. Let's imagine a member of parliament in Mr. Putin's party has gone on TV and said directly he wants to starve the people who live in this place. Let's imagine more than 100 aid groups sign a letter that say it's the Russian government's siege that's causing the starvation. Let's imagine we've seen in front of our own eyes the victims of that starvation in desperate straits, their bodies emaciated, their eyes empty. And then let's imagine Mr. Putin comes out and says there's no starvation in eastern Ukraine. He would, of course, rightly be castigated, cast out, and derided. Benjamin Netanyahu has done exactly this against exactly the same context, and he deserves exactly the same disdain from our media and from our politicians. Things are changing on Gaza. It's too late for many. But now we need to do more and do it faster and see the truth in front of our own faces.
I mean, we don't have to imagine that example of deliberate starvation of Ukrainian people was a Soviet policy half a century ago. Yeah, you know, I agree. I think what is happening in Gaza is terrible. It can't be stomached. I think it's a difficult political situation to resolve because Hamas is a terrorist organization that has attacked Israel. I have always supported a two-state solution. I have. However, practically, I don't think a state can just be allowed to come into being if it's going to be run by a group that is dedicated to Israel's destruction. So so it's a complicated situation to resolve, but the starving is not it's not morally complicated at all. It can't be allowed to go on. This is not about, making the American taxpayers pay for starving people elsewhere. Obviously, I don't think there's any obligation to help people, but there certainly is a generosity and a willingness to do so that is being thwarted by Israel controlling the area. And they control it so totally that on some level now, if the enemy force is not, I know it's not totally defeated, but they've killed tons of Hamas people. It doesn't have a functioning other entity in charge of it right now. At some level, you are now morally obligated to attend to not that I really want like an Israeli occupation or something, but they should supply food to the people there, given that they control all the entryway access points.
Well, and also, on the point of what American obligations are, you and I have talked numerous times about the enormous amounts of military aid that are given by the US to Israel. Yeah. Now, that supplies very blatantly obvious leverage that neither Biden nor Trump have particularly used. Biden paused one arms shipment. And, you and I talked all those months ago about the fact that the blockade of aid at that time was so severe that we built that ludicrous floating pier at the cost of many millions of dollars, which
broke off immediately.
Which then broke apart and floated away somewhere and was like, let's not do that. So, by simply applying the most basic of American pressure, you could alleviate some of this catastrophic human suffering. And, I do think that the two-state solution ultimately is the best solution. It will take a long time to get from here to there, but, people are being starved to death by a government that is a recipient of massive American aid.
And you're right that the domestic politics with respect to Israel is really changing. Obviously, the left is very upset, has been historically. Mainstream Democrats are becoming more resistant to Israel. And then on the right, this is becoming this is not a 50-50 issue. This is becoming a 70-30 or an 80-20 issue where the online younger right people are. It's a no-brainer that they don't want to continue supporting Israel.
Absolutely.
Up next, a GOP leader says that the Democratic Party is leaderless after watching Cory Booker's outburst on the Senate floor. We'll tell you more. Stay with us.
The Democratic Party needs a wake-up call. And what are the very people here elected to defend the Constitution of the United States saying, today let's look the other way and pass some resources that won't go to Connecticut, that won't go to Illinois, that won't go to New York, that will go to the states he likes. That is complicity with an authoritarian leader who is trashing our Constitution.
That, of course, was Cory Booker blasting fellow Democrats on the Senate floor on Tuesday, accusing them of being complicit with President Trump's policies.
The New Jersey Democrat objected to the bipartisan police funding bills co-sponsored by Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar and her colleague Catherine Cortez Masto and Republican Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley. Let's watch.
This, to me, is the problem with Democrats in America right now, is we're willing to be complicit to Donald Trump to let this pass through when we have all the leverage right now there is to say, if you're as passionate about police as we are, then pass bills out of this body that will help the police officers in Washington, that will help the police officers in Illinois, that will help the police officers in New Jersey, that will help the police officers in New York. Don't be complicit to the President of the United States.
Booker, who might well be a potential candidate for president in 2028, slammed law firms, universities and corporate media for bending a knee to President Trump. Let's listen to that.
I see law firms bending a knee to this president, not caring about the larger principles, that those free speech rights, that you could take on any client, why are you bending the knee? I see universities that should be bastions of free speech bending at the knee to this president. I see businesses taking late-night talk show hosts off the air because they dare to insult a president. I see people who want mergers suddenly think that they have to pay tribute to this president.
GOP Senator Kevin Cramer reacted to Booker's outburst on the Senate floor against his own party. Here's Cramer on Fox Business calling the Dems leaderless.
And so you have pragmatic Democrats that want to get things done, particularly policing bills that come out of committee unanimously, strong bipartisan support. And then you have the other side that strictly sees that as a victory for Donald Trump. Right now, they seem to be a little bit leaderless, and consequently, the kids are fighting.
Yeah, I mean, this is an age-old dilemma. Do you go along with the majority party so that you get kind of something you want? A lot of those Dems in those states, Klobuchar, et cetera, want funding for police. Should you go along, or should you, totally fight, resist, not go along, and then you don't get anything, but then you deprive them of a win, but then Republicans turn around and say, well, we were trying to give money to the police. The Democrats are against that. Their slogan was defund the police as recently as 4 years ago. You want to vote for that? It seems like that's the more politically perilous thing to do than to just go along. So I also don't think, I don't have anything against Cory Booker. At one point, he was one of the Democrats I liked better than others because I liked his education policies, were a little bit more friendly to my libertarian views on school choice. He kind of dropped that whole thing, and I don't know that he, righteous anger sort of it came off a little fake to me, but that's critiquing a performance, so who cares? But he's probably wrong about the politics there. I don't know.
So the thing about Cory Booker is that I think one often ends up debating his performance, like the Spartacus moment and all of that. And, I, like you, tend to think that it can come across a little bit forced or contrived as a performance. Now, of the clips that we played, the one that I had greatest sympathy for was his argument about institutions bending the knee to Trump. I'm not sure if I would exactly articulate every part of it the same way he did, but I do think that law firms and universities and the Paramount case are all strong examples of that, and so it's fair enough to raise it. Where I was a little bit more uncertain was this issue of the policing, the disbursement of money to police forces. I noticed that Klobuchar sort of pushed back and essentially said to him, you didn't show up for committee hearings where you could have made this like, you could have tried to mark up the bill in the way that you wanted. She framed it very slightly more subtly than that, but that was plainly what she was driving at. And then that criticism in turn gets into the idea that is Booker more interested in sort of trying to create these moments than he is in trying to shift the policy one way or another. Now, I get that a lot of Democrats are very angry about what Trump is doing. I get that a lot of grassroots Democrats want to see the party's elected representatives push much harder against Trump. The problem that they have over there on Capitol Hill is they don't really have much power. They're in the minority in both chambers, so there's not a whole lot you can do. So Booker's, I think, trying to synthesize or articulate that kind of anger. Whether it leads anywhere beyond its sort of performance, I'm not too sure.
Look, Chuck Schumer is not the right leader in the Senate for this moment, I think. He's not a strong enough personality. He's very traditional in his thinking.
An institutionalist.
He's an institutionalist. He doesn't have that many of his own views, or is well known for. I'm sure he has his own views, but is well known for this is the thing. He's like a Bernie Sanders, he's all about economic inequality and populism and getting more money for the working class. To the extent Chuck Schumer has a thing like that, honestly, it's support for Israel, which is certainly not politics that are fitting this moment.
Certainly not among the Democratic base in particular.
Right. So I see why Cory Booker is trying to be more vocal. The Dems, they should do like a debate series or something where they pick a couple people representing a couple different trajectories, the Democratic Party. Like, what do we actually have to wait for the 2028 primaries to work all this out? Maybe it'd behoove them to do it sooner than that. Just pick a direction, get some feedback from actual voters, from actual people in the country for what they want them to do. Because do they want them to just, scream into the wilderness with no power, but at least they sound angry? Or do they want them to work with Republicans to get more funding for police or whatever, wherever they can? Do they want moderation? Do they want temperamental outrage but policy moderation? Do they want temperamental moderation but policy outrage? I don't know. They gotta figure that stuff out.
I actually think your idea of a debate series is quite a good one. Not that you're generally in the business of giving advice to the Democratic Party, but I think...
I can help moderate it if you want.
You should be on stage.
You would do a good job.
You should be on stage between Bernie Sanders and who would be the voice of moderation? Pete Buttigieg or something. Actually, talking of Buttigieg, and to your point about the debate, I saw an interesting comment from him. this whole discussion has been beset by very typical Democratic infighting. Buttigieg was on some podcast just within the past couple of days, and he was talking about Zoran Mamdani. And Buttigieg's point was that those policies that Mamdani is advocating are obviously not going to be a particularly great fit for all sorts of parts of the country. Buttigieg is now a resident of your native Michigan, of course, having moved from Indiana. And he was saying essentially there are still things that can be learnt from Mamdani's kind of style of communication that could be transferable to other policy platforms. To me, that's a legitimate point. I don't think that it is fair to reduce Mamdani just to a guy who's good on TikTok, but I think that his communication strategy was very good and was fused with what the Democratic electorate in New York wants. I hope, mature enough to think that what the Democratic electorate in New York wants is not necessarily what the general electorate in Pennsylvania wants, or Michigan for that matter. But Buttigieg got kind of dragged, at least on a lot of the tweets that I was seeing, for just sort of diminishing Mamdani or suggesting it was all a surface level thing. And so the Democratic circular firing squad, I think, is underway here, which is a bit unfortunate in my view.
Dems in disarray.
Dems in disarray once again.
Yeah, Mamdani was obviously gifted in terms of the communication strategy this time around. I would say his style of communicating 4 years ago, which I pointed out was very much not good policy. I mean, just tweeting things that were popular in 2020, not so much now. But just being willing to talk to people on the street or make videos, whatever, shows a lot of freshness and an energy that it would behoove Dems to adopt, and Republicans as well. And successful Republicans have done that.
Absolutely. Next up, President Trump is calling for an investigation into Nancy Pelosi and blasting Josh Hawley's bill banning congressional stock trading. Stick with us, we'll be right back.
President Trump is calling for Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi to be investigated.
Senator Josh Hawley's bill banning stock trading advanced in a Senate committee vote Wednesday. Here's President Trump speaking on whether he supports it.
Well, I like it conceptually. I don't know about it, but I like it conceptually. And, you know, Nancy Pelosi became rich by having inside information. She made a fortune with her husband, and I think that's disgraceful. So in that sense, I'd like it, but I'd have to really see I study these things very carefully, and this just happened. So I'll take a look at it. Nancy Pelosi should be investigated because she has the highest return of anybody practically in the history of Wall Street, save a few.
Now, while Pelosi's office has emphasized that she doesn't own any stock, her husband certainly does.
Meanwhile, the president took to Truth Social to attack Hawley himself. Trump called Hawley a second-tier senator and a pawn, writing in part, why would one Republican Senator Josh Hawley from the great state of Missouri join with all of the Democrats to block a review sponsored by Senator Rick Scott with the support of almost all other Republicans of Nancy Pelosi's stock trading over the last 25 years. The information was inappropriately released just minutes before the vote, very much like sabotage.
Hawley told reporters he wants Trump to sign the bill and that he'd be happy to tweak it to fit his wants, which sounds a rather peculiar thing to say. I don't think you want to be tweaking legislation just to placate Mr. Trump, who seems to be objecting because this bill has been shifted a little bit. It will apply to future presidents and vice presidents. And as I understand the version that is now the relevant one, it would allow Trump and Vance to keep stock holdings that they currently have, but not buy new stock for the rest of their time in office. Trump seems highly peeved that the shift of this bill has moved over from Nancy Pelosi herself, who he obviously wants put on the figurative rack, to a situation that might in fact impede his own stock dealings.
Yes, this bill is a good idea.
Yes.
In some version of it should, I would hope, should pass. Trying to get the government to regulate itself, to apply to itself the same rules for everybody else, is a difficult thing to do, unfortunately. Josh Hawley is a Republican that is very much not from my wing of the right, and we have numerous disagreements. I think he teams up with Democrats, yes, quite a bit too much on antitrust and some economic issues, but this is an issue in which I firmly support him, and I'm glad he continues to bring this up. And if he's saying that So I do defer to him on this issue. He has a history of really going after it. Yes, Pelosi. It was always a bit odd to me that she has this husband who's making money from owning stocks in tech companies in Facebook. They own stock in Facebook, and she's proclaiming things about Facebook policies and what she likes and doesn't like about Zuckerberg all the time. That is weird, and she's not some random representative either. She's the most powerful at one point Democrat in the House. Yeah. That is always. It's always been weird that they get these. Meetings, they know which way the market's going to go. They can profit from that. There was some indication of COVID, early awareness leading some people to do that. Yeah. When you do that in the private sector, you get an investigation, you get
insider
trading. Big trouble.
Right.
So why don't they, if anything, it should be the other way around. It should be in the private sector. Well, you get some information, good for you. You may get to make a good trade. The people setting the rules and regulations should not be able to benefit from the inside information they have. But it's the opposite. Right. It's the exact reverse.
I think you're more lenient on the private sector than I would be. But look, I think there's massive public support for very good reason on a ban on congressional stock trading. Obviously, members of Congress get advance information and can themselves directly influence things that would have an effect on certain companies' share price. To enable people to actually act on that for their own personal gain seems just obviously unfair and unjust on its face.
Yeah, imagine there's about to be a global pandemic.
That's
honey, buy Pfizer.
Absolutely.
It's only a hop, skip, and a jump away from. Green light that dangerous research in China and buy Pfizer, right? Starts to influence. It could influence catastrophic. That starts getting like James Bond villain type territory.
We veered a little into conspiracy there, but the overall principle is very dubious indeed.
I'm saying I wouldn't want to give. I want to remove the incentive. To look at things like that. Well, on one hand, millions will die, but it could be good for me. That's not good. Never good. That does it for us on Rising Live today. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, now available anywhere you can find podcasts. See you later.